And then as you turn the page over, we're going to go very quickly through verse 13 through 39, this end of this chapter, because he goes into this long speech about the scribes and the Pharisees being hypocrites. And you'll notice these are strong words. There's nothing neutral about these verses.
Now again, if the context is we're at the temple, out in the outer courtyards, Jesus is teaching his disciples, and yet these groups that have been debating with him are still there hearing all of this. Verse 14 is interesting. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, or play actors. Ye devour widows' houses, and for pretense make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. This underlying word for to devour means to squander or to fully consume down till there's nothing left. And think about how often in the Old Testament, God says in the law of Moses, make sure to take care of the widow, the orphan, the fatherless. And instead, these people who've been put in positions of power are taking advantage of those who are disadvantaged. And the advantaged are making more advantage for themselves by disadvantaging the disadvantaged even more. It's very sad.
So if I could sum up verse 13 through 22 using verse 23, I think it's a conclusion to that entire column. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe of mint, anise, and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. Did you notice his example, his little object lesson? Mint, anise, and cumin are the smallest herbs that you could grow. And they're saying, look how righteous I am. I even pay my tithing on my mint, anise, and cumin, the very smallest of the forgettable herbs in my garden. I will even pay tithing on those. Look how good I am. And he's saying, and you're leaving out judgment, mercy, and faith. You're missing the whole point.
These three words here, justice in the Old Testament, really could be translated as righteousness. Now, it's a different word here in Greek. It means to make good, righteous decisions. In the Old Testament, the word justice and righteous meant the same thing. So when he's talking about meting out justice, it means living righteously. But then you have this word mercy, very powerful. This word mercy, when it's connected to the Old Testament, is related to the compassion, the hesed that God has and that we should be having, which means covenantal loyalty and everlasting kindness to one another. And it gets back to those comments he made some verses ago where he said, love God, love your neighbor. Look, it doesn't matter how much tithing you pay on great or little things. I mean, that is an important thing, but don't let that get in the way of loving God, loving your neighbor, living righteously and acting mercifully, and showing loving kindness to God and to those around you, because that's what he does. And he models for us how we should be living.
And then verse 24, he says, ye blind guides, which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. You'll notice the contrast. He picked the very smallest animal he could come up with, a gnat. And then he contrasted it with the very biggest animal. We're on the two extremes of the animal kingdom here with these people. And he's saying, you're straining at a gnat or straining out a gnat. They would actually put these cheesecloths over their pitchers and their amphoras and their cups, and they will strain out in case if a gnat or a little flying insect got into your drink, they'll strain that out because by the law of Moses, they're not allowed to consume gnats or flies, mosquitoes, all of those flying insects. So we'll strain those out. And he's saying, but you're eating a camel.
Both are actually unclean things.
Both are unclean.
In the law of Moses, and one takes a lot more effort.
And Joseph Smith gives this beautiful conclusion to verse 24 when he added, who make yourselves appear unto men that ye would not commit the least sin, and yet ye yourselves transgress. the whole law. You're eating the whole camel. But you're showing people how righteous you're appearing to be when you strain out these gnats. And then he says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess." And he basically tells them to cleanse the platter. Verse 27, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness."
So they're on the Temple Mount. What might people be able to see when they walk right off the Temple Mount? What are they going to see?
And if you look to the left, if you're walking down to the south, up on the southern part of the Mount of Olives, you've got tombs, you've got sepulchres. And keep in mind, when a person dies in the first century, and if you're not going to bury them in the ground, you're going to bury them in a tomb, you place them in the tomb, you prepare their body for burial, then you seal up the stone and you paint it white. That's your message that there's a newly buried body in the tomb. A year later, after it's gone through a whole year's cycle, you then unseal the tomb, go in, and you gather the bones together, put them in an ossuary, and put the ossuary in a niche or a loculi, and now the table is ready for the next family member to die in your family. And so a whited sepulcher looks beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, it's got a decaying body for that year. These are very strong words against the Pharisees.